Ladies and gentlemen, this is the 12th and final round.
Right hand, Golovkin steps in and down he goes again. Unbelievable. Mayweather makes him pay. What a rookie mistake. A sensational left hook by De La Hoya.
It's fact. I'm the best. You know what I mean? Sometimes I don't want to believe it myself, but it's the truth. I'm the best.
I'm going to show you how great I am.
From Southern California, this is the Last Round Podcast.
And we're back once again on the last round here for episode 96. Thanks again for joining us, whether you're listening on Spotify, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Boxing Socials, YouTube. One day, I just need to say one of those random podcasts that we have. One of those random podcast platforms that we have, because every time I look at the list, I feel like there's more. Am I wrong, Mike?
No, you're right. There was another one the other day that popped up that we applied for, and I think got accepted on another podcast platform. And there's that Indian one that we're on. I can't remember.
Well, India is a big market. There's a lot of people.
Yeah.
Hopefully they like boxing and they're listening to us. But, just repeating myself, thanks again for joining us, guys. No guests this week. We decided not to have a guest this week as there's quite a bit of boxing actually happening, especially with the last week in the news and with events and stuff like that, especially with the whole Canelo-DAZN thing, which was a big hot topic, especially because Canelo's involved, DAZN, Golden Boy, and all that stuff, which we'll touch on that a little bit later. But jumping right into it, this past Saturday from the 12th of September from the York Hall in London on BT Sport, Anthony Yarde gets the 6-round TKO over Dec Spelman. Yarde hadn't had a serious fight since August 2019, which is, I believe, when he lost to Kovalev. But he actually had pretty good moments against Kovalev. There was a moment, a round or two in that fight against Kovalev in Russia where Yarde looked like he was about to take him out. Kovalev looked like he was dead tired, and he was just kind of running on fumes. But he was able to survive, and then Kovalev was able to get the victory out in the end. But what did you think of Yarde's performance, Mike?
Good performance, in spells. I don't think Dec Spelman's, ever going to win a world title, but, he was a hard guy. You could see that Yarde was kind of collecting the rounds. Early on, I thought Dec Spelman actually probably won the first round. Then Yarde kind of, I don't know whether because he'd been off for so long and he wanted to get a few rounds in, just get some bit more exposure, a bit more time under the lights. But eventually he wore him down, and maybe a little bit of a premature stoppage. I think Yarde was going to finish him off, but Spelman kind of beat the count. The referee looked at him and waved him off, and Spelman was kind of a little bit pissed off. I think that was the first time he'd actually ever been stopped. He'd lost, but he'd never actually been stopped. So I think that was something he'd rather have. Either have got knocked out or, lost on points, kind of go out on his shield. But, I think the question really is, where does Yarde go from here? Is he going to go back down the WBO route? He's not in an easy division. You've got those big names, Kovalev still around, Bivol, obviously, Artebedabiev, who's actually just, broke his ribs and his fight has got cancelled. Gilberto Ramirez, somebody
that's what I was thinking of too, just because I feel like a fight between Ramirez and Anthony Yarde would actually be a pretty good competitive fight. I think so. I think they're both matched up pretty evenly just by the eye test. What do you think?
No, I agree. Ramirez, I think it'd be a very good test for Ramirez, probably be, his toughest test because, Yarde's, big tough guy. He'll get in there. He's showed his pedigree against Kovalev, where I think if you look at Ramirez, he's 40-0, I think, and he's never really faced anybody of note. I think we probably both agree on that. I like, Joe Smith Jr. I think that would be a good war, but I think, with Joe Smith Jr. winning his last fight, he's put himself, in a mandatory position. I don't know whether he'd really want to, drop back down to face something a bit like Yarde. Callum Johnson, I like that as a British dust-up. Callum's been up there, fought Beterbiev, come unstuck against him. But I think that would still be another test for Yarde.
Right.
Because, in my opinion, Yarde's kind of got a very odd resume. He's got a lot of D-level and C-level fighters. And then he just jumped up and fought Kovalev, who's probably an A-class fighter. And then he's just gone back down again, and now he's fighting guys again that really he should beat. There's never really been a steady progression. He's never done like D, C, gone up to B, earned himself a mandatory position, then for the A-level fighter. So interesting to see, which route they go down, him and Tundi Ajayi.
I think Anthony Yarde's still in a good position, even though he did lose last year to Sergey Kovalev. And I think he had another fight earlier this year, just before COVID. He got the win there, but it wasn't anybody significant, just to kind of get him back in the rhythm. But I like Yarde. I think he's still got a lot left ahead of him. Like we just touched on, Gilberto Ramirez, I think would be a good fight. Bivol, I think would be a good fight, even though Bivol was a world champion. Bivol's in terms of Bivol's in a tough spot, man. Like he's obviously a good fighter. He's a world champion, but like he just doesn't bring anything to the table in terms of the money and the business aspect, which is why nobody wants to. He can't secure a big name opponent or somebody who's who would help make money with him. Like he's in a tough spot. But in terms of Yarde, I think he's still got a lot left ahead of him. Excuse me, especially if Sergey Kovalev is. I mean, did Sergey Kovalev, has he retired? Has he officially? He hasn't officially retired, right? I know recently out here in Southern California, his assault charge in the county of San Bernardino, I think, just got dismissed or something like that. I saw recent news about that where it just got dismissed or something like that, so he doesn't have to go to trial for that or something like that. I don't quote me on that, but I believe I saw something about that. I don't think he's necessarily retired or he's announced that he's retired, but I mean, I think both you and I know that Kovalev isn't going to be the same. So Yarde, I think at this point is in a better position in the light heavyweight division than Sergey Kovalev is. What do you think?
I'd agree with that. I think, Kovalev, with the rumored DAZN deal he signed for the Canelo fight, I believe he got that. And then, like a comeback fight was part of the deal. So I'm sure he's probably got at least one more well-paid fight from, DAZN. So I'm sure we'll see him back against what kind of caliber of opponent. I don't know. Is he just going to cash out? He's been at the pinnacle twice. So probably come back one last payday, and then, that's all we'll see from him.
Never know. Maybe Yarde will want a rematch against Kovalev, and I think Yarde would be the favorite this time, but we'll see. Also moving on that card, Mark Heffron. Hopefully I pronounced that right. 25-1-1. Fights to a draw, a 10-round draw with Denzel Bentley like the car. What do you think about this matchup, Mike?
Close fight, depending on what style you like. I think, looking at the Twitter, some people had Heffron winning. He'd come in, throw some good blows, come forward fighter where, Denzel Bentley was more of your slick backup fighter, worked on his back foot, came in with some good shots. So it really depended on what kind of style you liked, because everyone seemed to, pick, one and then somebody else would pick the other. So, I think a rematch should probably be the right thing so we can get a winner. I think Frank Warren on the show afterwards kind of said that, that it was a close fight and really a pick 'em. So, let's do it again.
Really a pick 'em. Also on that card, Eskal Usman. I hope I pronounced that right. Remains undefeated with the 10-round unanimous decision win over Cedric Paynaud, who has 8 wins and 8 losses and 3 draws. Did I read that right?
Yep. 8-3.
Right? Yep. 8-3. What'd you think about Usman's performance, his unanimous decision win?
I thought it was a good performance. Paynew, I think everyone will kind of remember him for his couple of fights that he had with Conor Benn, when I think everyone thought that he won the first, but Conor Benn kind of got a bit of home cooking, and then, they fought again. Good, tough, tricky opponent. I thought Usman did pretty well. He kind of needs to move on fast because of, 31 years old, kind of turned pro late, has a good amateur record. So he's got a good bit of pedigree there. But, from that performance, I don't know, he's kind of looking like he's maybe more of a domestic fighter and maybe European. I don't know if we're going to see him up in the, the world market. But, Paynew, good solid fighter. I think, would see him used again on the Matchroom and Frank Warren shows.
Yeah, we'll see. You're right. Also, Ed Harrison gets the points victory
over 4 rounds against Muhammad Bilal Ali.
Yeah, I wasn't about to try that name. That's why I hesitated, because I was trying to pronounce it in my head. So right here it says a referee score was 39-37 for Harrison, who's a 26-year-old club fighter who's now 2-4 with 0 KOs, and had a notable upset over the 24-year-old prospect Ali, who suffers his first professional loss early in his career. So he could still rebound, obviously, if he's still dedicated after that. What'd you think about Ali's first loss, even though he's early? He's still early professional career guy, and Harrison, I guess, getting the upset.
It was kind of strange. Ali looked in parts like he kind of, was a fluid, kind of solid fighter. He'd pick his shots well, but every time that Harrison kind of really put the pressure on him, Ali just wanted to grab him and tie up, and actually he lost a point, I think, and it was in the second round. For that, the referee kind of got sick of him always just tying up and grabbing a hold of him. I don't know whether it's lack of sparring, whether, he just needs to do some more sparring to, be used to people putting the pressure on him instead of, him being the forward fighter. I thought it was, kind of funny at the end that the referee had obviously given his card in and announced Harrison as the winner, but the announcer, for some reason, announced Muhammad Bilal Ali as the winner at the end. The referee had to go over and tell him, like, no, that's the wrong guy.
Come on.
Kind of made for a funny moment.
I mean, that's always going to happen in especially in boxing and MMA. You would think, just because you have to rely on one person, and usually most of the time the announcer gets it, I would say 98% right most of the time. But there is that one time that it happens when it's a major fight and it's got a lot of eyeballs that people are like, oh my God. I remember, wasn't there one with Michael Buffer where he announced somebody as I think it was a fight in, I don't know if it was England or somewhere over there in Europe. Do you remember that?
I know he's done it a few times when people have coming out, he's pronounced their names wrong, or he said the same person twice.
Right.
He does seem to make a few more mistakes, in his later years.
Yeah. But he's still really good though. He still, sets the bar, but it does happen. It still does happen here and there. So, also rounding off that card in another 4-rounder, Joshua Frankham gets his first professional win with unanimous decision over Kevin McCauley. What'd you think about Joshua's performance?
I thought he looked good. He kind of got signed to Frank Warren. He's the cousin of Tyson Fury, and Tyson Fury told Frank Warren, how good he was and has an eye for potential. So, Frank listened to him and signed him up. I thought McCauley, the opponent, did well. He's 15, got 208 losses and 12 draws. So, he's obviously a good, solid journeyman. He kind of went in there, gave Frankham a good 4 rounds. Frankham's from a fight family. You've got Charlie Frankham is also signed to Frank Warren. So, good 4 rounds early on in his career. Hard to really tell, when he's fighting a journeyman. You just have to just wait and see. He looked good, though.
Right. Yeah, hopefully. Still early. Still extremely early. The earliest you can be in your professional career. Moving on, also this past Saturday from the Bubble. The Bubble's still going. It's been going on for months at the MGM Grand in Las Vegas on ESPN. Mean Machine Kavalauskas gets the 8th round TKO over Machine-Zewski. This was for the vacant WBC Americas title, which is, I don't even think we should even mention these titles anymore, especially when it's not a world title. They're like so, I feel like it changes every single time with these less than world titles, but I digress. This fight, I don't know about you, Mike, but this, up until the TKO, this is a close fight.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what'd you think?
No, I agree. Afterwards, Cal Moretti from Top Rank actually put a snapshot of the cards, which had two of the judges had Zewski ahead, 67-65, and then the third judge actually had Kavalauskas 67-65. So that just goes to show it was it was a close fight, and I thought early on, Cain Velasquez was having, some luck. He looked like he was getting through with those hooks. Zewski went to his corner. I don't know whether his corner told him or whether, he just noticed. He changed his style, came out, kept the right hand higher to stop Cain Velasquez coming through with those left hooks. And, he just was boxing from the outside. Cain Velasquez just liked to come forward, to try to land those big, heavy shots. So it was a very good tactical fight, but eventually, Cain Velasquez just managed to wear him down with those thudding shots. Man, you could hear, with no crowd there, you could just hear how hard Cain Velasquez hits.
Right.
People may remember him, he was a former Terrence Crawford opponent.
Right.
They
knocked him down, too.
Where they just used to call him Mean Machine because nobody could pronounce his last name. That's right. Yeah, he knocked Crawford down as well. And then he also knocked him down again when I think it was an actual knockdown, but they called it a slip.
Yeah, but he did get knocked down. He did.
Yeah. So it's just where to go from here. He's won. He won that fight, picked up a lesser WBC belt, but he's a top ranked fighter.
Well, yeah, but you don't think that Top Rank is still keeping him active and hope that he gets more wins because from their perspective, from their angle for Crawford, it's smart because it gives them something to at least have like as a plan B. If they put out Mean Machine out there a couple more times or one more time and he gets a notable win over a better name or something like that, and Crawford obviously can't get a fight with Brook, obviously he hasn't had anything announced, or if he fights Brook or what have you, Top Rank can rely on Mean Machine again and be like, oh, the rematch, Mean Machine's even better prepared this time. And the only reason because they would entertain a rematch is because, one, like you said, Mean Machine is a Top Rank fighter. I'm sure he has an agreement with them for a couple fights. And they need an option for Crawford again because they have limited options with him. And he's a world champion. Like Crawford's a world champion. So I honestly think that their Top Rank is kind of molding Mean Machine to kind of keep him active, and they're hoping that he wins, especially if they put like a more significant name in front of him in his following fight, because they can use him as like a plan B for Crawford again. Like, oh yeah, he's going to rematch him, and then they're going to market the heck out of Mean Machine's last like 2 or 3 fights, 2 fights. Like, oh no, he's been great the last 2 fights. He's won a knockout and then a unanimous decision win or 2 knockouts. And he said he's way better prepared to fight Crawford. And they're going to sell the fact that Mean Machine knocked down Crawford. Essentially, it was twice. It was one recognized one, right? But it was twice. It's just I don't know why the second one wasn't recognized. It was stupid. But I mean, that's what I think. I think Top Rank is molding him to keep him as another opponent for Crawford in the future, especially sometime next year. What do you think?
I agree with you, but it's who wants to see it?
Well, yeah, but I mean, like, that's what they're doing. But you're right. Who wants to? We don't want to see it again, but that's what they're doing.
It was like when they signed, they signed Chris Van Heerden for that short period of time. They were trying to, mold him into a future Terrence Crawford opponent, but obviously something happened, and he managed to get released, and I think he ended up getting picked up by the PBC.
Right.
But it's the same old thing that we've spoken about God knows how many times on this podcast about Crawford and his opponents, and I understand it's not necessarily his fault because they're all tied up with the PBC, but they need to do something because he can't. I mean, I'm more excited about the Kell Brook fight than I am the Cain Velasquez fight. Cain Velasquez's first fight was good. He knocked him down. Crawford turned it around and knocked him out. Cain Velasquez does have a good style. He does have a good look. He's got a good physique. He's really muscular. Powerful shots and stuff like that. But I think he's kind of made for Crawford. I think maybe Crawford got caught a little bit cold and took it maybe a little bit too lightly because of how skillful he is compared to Cain Velasquez. Right. And I think if they fought again, I think Terrence Crawford personally would go in there. He'd more switched on this time, and I think he would get him out of there. It's
earlier.
It's the same old thing, dude. Is like, who wants to see that? We need to see some names on that resume.
I don't even think the Brook fight is going to happen. I really don't. I think when they were reporting on the ESPN broadcast a couple weeks ago or whatever, they were reporting the negotiations between Brook and Crawford. They they put a graphic up on the screen, and like I know we touched on this before, but they put a graphic up on the screen saying, "Oh yeah, there's a report saying that Brook was offered, $2 million or whatever to fight Terrence Crawford." And it's just like, what report? Like, you guys are Top Rank, ESPN. Like, you guys know the details, Like, but honestly, that was their way to try to put pressure on Brook. That's because they put it on the broadcast. Because when do you ever see that? I mean, that was their way to try to put pressure on Brook because, I think from my perspective, I think they were having a tough time negotiating with Brook and Eddie Hearn. I think he's still promoted by Eddie Hearn. So they were just like, you know what, let's just put it on the broadcast, try to put pressure on them so we can get more eyeballs on the situation. And I honestly don't think anything's going to work out. They're either going to have to pay Brook whatever number he's asking for, or he's not going to take the fight. And even then, if they pay him the money, nobody's still going to want to see it. Even though you're right, I'm more intrigued in a Brook Crawford matchup than a obviously Mean Machine rematch. But I still might we'll touch on it obviously if it gets made, but I'm not counting Brook out completely in that matchup, which is a lot more you can say about Crawford's past opponents, but I don't think we're gonna see Crawford in the ring the rest of this year at all. I just don't. I'd be surprised if we are.
I think we may see the Brook fight because it's been rumored for a long time.
Yeah, rumored.
I think Brook's getting to the point where he's going to have to accept one of these paychecks soon. It looks like the Amir Khan fight has gone. It's kind of died down. I think even the British public now are probably just like, dude, that's been talked about for so many years that just either do it or don't do it. So I think that, it's one last shot against a world title for Kell Brook. It's a decent payday, like $1.5 million, I think the rumor was.
Something like that.
And, Kell Brook himself may have that, in his head where it's just like, you know what? He's like, I may be able to just pull off one more performance. As fans, we always think that, like if can he turn back the clock just for that one night? And I'm sure fighters think that, that's why they come back in the 40s and the 50s because, they just have that thing in their head. Like, you know what? I might just be able to pull it out one last time.
He might. I don't know. I know people say he's washed. I wouldn't use that word at all. I wouldn't use that word at all for him. But he's not what he once was, obviously.
No, he's not. I think those losses to, Errol Spence and Triple G and the, the fractures in the eye sockets, obviously, didn't help it. I think fighting at, trying to boil himself down to, 147 because, everybody said, he should have been at 154, maybe even higher because he's solid muscle. So I think, just trying to get down to that 147 category was just, he was taking a little bit out of him. There wasn't that top gear because he, just starved himself so much to get down to the weight. But I think in terms of name recognition and in terms of fight, how many people would tune in to watch it, I think the Kell Brook Crawford fight kind of appeals on, both sides. I think it appeals in the UK and it appeals over here. So
right.
Hopefully Kell Brook eventually just decides, you know what, I need to take one of these paydays before people stop asking.
Right. You're right. Yeah. But, I think right now he holds a little bit more of the cards in terms of the negotiation with Top Rank because Top Rank is essentially desperate and they need an opponent for Crawford, like some type of name. Because, I don't know. I keep going back to my original suggestion for him. Top Rank should just let him go to Showtime or Fox and fight one of these PBC guys. The guy's good enough to figure. Like the guy's good enough that he'd likely be he'd likely be a favorite against any of them. Maybe besides Spence. I mean, but all of them would be intriguing matchups, obviously, because all the best welterweights are under Al Heyman. But honestly, if I was Top Rank, I'd be like, you know what? Forget it. Let's send Crawford over there, one-time fight with them, and we'll get a unification matchup or against a Sean Porter or a Danny Garcia or a Keith Thurman. Let's send him over there. Send him over there and let him get a win. And then they'll show him like, yeah, look, I came over here and I beat one of your guys on your platform. Like I think that's the only option they could take. I mean, but obviously, that's just from us looking in. I don't know how ESPN and Top Rank's contract is in terms of broadcast rights, but which I'm assuming they have first dibs. But I think their backs have been against the wall for quite some time now, where I think that's the only logical solution. Send Crawford over there to Fox Showtime, try to let him try and fight and get the win, and he then, especially if he fights another champion in Errol Spence or whoever, and he unifies titles, and he comes back to ESPN. That's what they did with Jose Ramirez, and he went to DAZN and unified. He became unified champion over Mo Hooker, and look, now he's a unified champion on ESPN. And I would say arguably that, I mean, in terms of popularity, more known, who do you think is more known, Jose Ramirez or Terrence Crawford? Who do you think? Exactly.
It's hard. Terrence Crawford is popular in the world of boxing as such, but Ramirez has a lot more loyal fans because he has that Mexican fan base.
Right.
And the annoying thing about your idea is that, if you interview Bob Arum, he can say whatever he wants. He can say, I've offered, PBC this amount of money, and right. I've told them that they can have Terrence Crawford, and you can't get a reply because Al Heyman does no interviews. So Bob can say whatever he wants.
He knows that.
Yeah, he can say I've offered them, but there's no Eddie Hearn on the other side. There's no, Al Heyman won't do any interviews. So, he could be holding Terrence Crawford hostage for all we know. But right. we would never find out because there's no spokesperson for PBC, which is, if it was Bob Arum and, Eddie Hearn, you can go back and forth. They can say what they want to the point where they kind of corner the other one, and then the fight has to be made.
Right. No, you're right. Yeah. And I think Bob Arum is smart enough to recognize that he's like, Al Heyman doesn't say anything. He's like, so I can say whatever I want. He was like, and it doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. So, which is smart, it's he's marketing his company, and he throws stuff out there, I remember there's a YouTube video out there where Spence and Crawford met up backstage at one of the events, and they're kind of talking back and forth, and they kind of get into it. And I remember Arum shows up, and Crawford and Spence's posses are both right there, and Arum shows up, and then I think Spence says I was like, oh, he says that Al Heyman, or Spence says to Bob Arum, he's like, oh yeah, Bob Arum says that Al Heyman is fake, that he's not real or something like that. And then Bob Arum is like, what are you talking about? He's like, you said in an interview that Al Heyman isn't real. He's like, that he's a fake guy. And then he starts laughing, like he knew like it was a joke, like pretty much saying, hey, yeah, I said it on purpose because it's funny, but he says it like it's real. But I don't know. Like you always get comedy out of Bob Arum, but you're right though. I still stand by that they should just let Crawford go to Fox, Showtime, PBC, and fight one of these guys. That's the only solution for him to get these guys, because obviously they're just going to rotate the PBC guys for years to come. So it is what it is.
Yeah, it's getting annoying, dude. I think every time somebody fights in the top 15 of the 147-pound category, this conversation pops up because, we're always kind of talking about the PBC, you're talking about the top guys, the champions, and, you always go back to this, like, are these guys ever going to fight? So it's just getting to the point where it's getting old. So, yeah,
we'll see, man. The co-main event for that top rank at the bubble, Joet Gonzalez returns after his first loss against Shakur Stevenson. I think it was last year. And he gets the unanimous decision win over Miguel Marriaga, who's been Marriaga's one of those guys at that weight class who's been rotated around for these higher level guys. He's that guy that they put in with, like, oh, okay, yeah, he's a formidable opponent. This was for the vacant WBO International Featherweight title. Gonzalez is back in the mix. I would say. I mean, I think it was good. I was reading a report that Gonzalez, they had offered him a couple guys to get back in the rhythm, and I think he had said that they were guys with like losing records. They had more losses than they had wins, but he wanted, I guess, a live body, quote unquote, to get right back in there. And Marriaga's been in there with a lot of guys. Obviously, he's not what he once was, but he is a name, and I commend Gonzalez for jumping back in there. Because I think his name is pretty much back in the mix to at least get another title shot or kind of get another big significant name in that weight class. I mean, what did you think about Gonzalez's performance?
I thought it was a good performance. Marriaga has been in there with, his only losses were to Lomachenko, Oscar Valdez, Nicholas Walters, all former champions or current champions. So, that shows, kind of pedigree that he was in there with. And I think from after a couple of rounds, you could kind of see that Joet Gonzalez had him under control, was really going to win. It looked like a 10-round decision unless Marriaga managed to catch him with one. I don't know whether if Marriaga really had enough that, one-punch knockout power, though.
Right.
I think the problem we have with Gonzalez is he's good, but he's in a very strong weight division. I don't see him beating a Josh Warrington, Gary Russell Jr., Shakur Stevenson, in my opinion, made easy work of Joet Gonzalez in the first fight, and he's a current champion in that weight division.
Right.
Your favorite, Kanzu, another one in that kind of weight division. That would be a good fight.
I think Steve Kim of ESPN tweeted that recently, that a fight between Kanzu and Joet Gonzalez would kind of be interesting, and they're both Golden Boy fighters technically.
That's a fun fight. I think it's good. Joet Gonzalez, more of the ball. Kanzu really just comes in and just his constant pressure. It's just the amount of punches he throws. So it would be a good clash of styles in that one, and should technically be easy to make. So, that's probably the one that we would see. But it looks like, Joet Gonzalez this time, and, in his previous run at the title, he always seems to go down the WBO route.
I mean, it's true. I mean, but you got to commend like Golden Boy and Top Rank regardless, is that like, they're willing to send, at least Golden Boy lately has been willing to send their guys over to Top Rank on ESPN to get their guys opportunities. I mean, this is the second fight in a row that Joet Gonzalez has had, and it's pretty much under the Top Rank and ESPN banner, even though he's a Golden Boy DAZN fighter, if you will. So, hey man, like in terms of Golden Boy putting it out there, you gotta give it to them. I think if you look at it from that standpoint, Matchroom and Golden Boy, at least in the last maybe 2 years or so, or year, they've, I guess, worked across promoter lines more than anybody at the moment, or am I wrong?
No, I would say so. I think Golden Boy have really come out on top, I think, on quite a lot of them. When he sent over Teixeira to the Top Rank show, and he came back with the world title.
Right.
So, Golden Boy, sneakily in the last year kind of built a very good stable after, I think me and you have said on the podcast, we kind of thought they seemed a little bit light in terms of, world champions and real pedigree. They kind of relied on Canelo, and then, Ryan Garcia popped up, and then Virgil Ortiz. But, ever since then, slowly but surely they've kind of picked up a lot of world titles, Josh Franco, Teixeira.
You're right, yeah.
Sneaky good stable.
No, sneaky good stable. Yeah. You can always, I mean, that's why like people talk a lot of crap about different promoters. They talk about a lot of crap about Golden Boy and stuff like that. And that, De La Hoya might have his behavior and stuff like that, or now with the Canelo lawsuit, as we'll touch on everything. But I mean, they've been around like since 2002. Like I think that's when De La Hoya incorporated Golden Boy as an actual business. So I don't want to even say that they've been surviving. Like, I think that's the wrong word, because that pretty much says like they've been on the decline, which I don't think so. I think it's just like they always find a way to, make it back, or make it back to some type of prominence or something like that. Obviously Canelo's the cash cow, but you got to give it to them. They're sending their guys over to all these other promoters, like, especially Top Rank, and then it's working out. The risk is working out for them, and they're getting rewarded. So, it is what it is. But just really quickly, like scores for that fight for Gonzalez's win over Marriaga were 97-93, 99-91, and 99-91, all for Gonzalez. So it looked like it was a clean sweep for Gonzalez. And he's obviously going to be watching the fight, which is in October, I believe the 9th of October, between Emmanuel Navarrete and Ruben Villa, which is for the vacant title that Stevenson vacated, I believe. And Ruben Villa is a Thompson's Boxing guy, I believe. I think he still fights under them. Mm-hmm. So that's a cool thing. Ruben Villa, I've been following him last couple of years, and it's cool to see these. It's always cool to see these local regional promotions, especially the one I would say I think you would agree, Thompson's Boxing. It's probably the most prominent local promotion we have here in the Southern California area. And it's always cool to see those guys actually work their way up and then get like on a big stage like that, right?
No, it is. You know, I think the biggest name that people would know would be Danny Roman. Obviously, was a Thompson's boxing figure, went over to Japan, picked up the world title, ended up unifying against TJ Doheny. And then obviously ended up losing to Akhmed Meladov earlier this year.
Right.
In the UK, I would say Thompson's is similar to like Steve Goodwin, and they're actually very similar in the fact that Thompson is a builder, and so is Steve Goodwin. They both seem to have the same job outside of boxing.
That's crazy.
It is good when you see those guys who are on the smaller stage and they're not earning that much money. Literally earning like a few $100s a fight to eventually work all the way up to a world title. Because it's slightly easier for those guys that come out of the Olympics, walk straight into some good money. They could just literally be a full-time boxer when you've got people like Andrew Cancio, who goes to work full-time and then has to fit in his runs and his gym workouts, in and around a full-time job.
Speaking of Cancio, like he's poor guy, man. He's been trying to get a fight schedule with Top Rank for months now, and they, for some reason or another, his opponent keeps getting rejected by the commission or something else happens. Poor guy, man. I don't know what's going on with him, but I hope to see him back at the ring soon, especially under a Top Rank banner. I think that's intriguing to see. Moving on, fight previews. This upcoming Saturday, the 19th of September, once again from the Bubble in Las Vegas on the Plus, ESPN Plus. Jose Pedraza, 27-3, goes up against Javier Molina. Pedraza is one of those guys like we talked about, like Marriaga, who's been kind of, I would think he's a little bit more elevated than Marriaga, at least in terms of their careers. But Pedraza has been one of those guys that's kind of been rotated around like the higher level guys in his division. But he did, I think the most notable one loss that he had was against Lomachenko, but he did give Lomachenko. There was moments where he gave Lomachenko a pretty decent fight, even though he ended up on the losing side of the matchup. But what do you think about between this fight between Pedraza and Molina?
Interesting fight. I think that, Pedraza, you're kind of looking, how much does he have left?
Right.
I think this fight's going to be up at 140, so he's moved up in weight. He's a good fighter. I actually quite like watching Pedraza. He does a lot of things really well. And if you were going to kind of teach somebody to box,
isn't he an Olympian?
I believe so. So.
Yeah,
he's a good fighter. I think the move up in weight will hopefully do him well, and I see him winning this fight. I think he's somebody that Top Rank like to use as a well-matched opponent, and I think moving this up to 140, he's going to be maybe a potential opponent further down the line for maybe Alvarez, Josh Taylor, Teofimo Lopez maybe when he moves up to 140, because Pedraza I still think still has that name recognition in my opinion.
Right, in terms of boxing fans, I think you're right. I think especially if he looks really good in this fight, knockout especially or stoppage. I think they're definitely going to put that type of marketing behind him. And like you said, having him at 140, you got Josh Taylor, Ramirez, Lopez, who I think moves up to 140, whether he wins or loses against Lomachenko or not, Mm-hmm. I still think Pedraza has enough left in the tank to keep it going. And now that he's in a new division, like you said, at 140, there's a lot more intriguing matchups, especially if he can keep that spark that, boxing fans know he has in terms of talent. Also on that card, I can never say his name. You got to say it, Mike.
F.A. Ajagba, 13-0, and Jonathan Rice, 13-5-1 in a big heavyweight clash. I believe this is Ajagba's first fight under the Top Rank banner since he left PBC.
Whoa.
Kind of good signing for Top Rank, really, because they have a lot of up-and-coming heavyweights. Obviously, Pulev, Tyson Fury, right. Guido Vinella, who signed with Sam Jones. Trying to think who else they have. Jared Anderson, the real big baby, as he calls himself. Jarrell Miller, if he ever comes back, another heavyweight signed to Top Rank. So they have a lot of.
You don't think, real quick, you don't think that the Top Rank terminated their relationship with Jarrell Miller after his last time? I think it's over. I don't think they're going to give him another chance. At least not Top Rank. I don't think so, man. I think they had a clause in there just because he has a notable history.
The problem is, though, as you know, being a hero and being a villain both sell.
That's true.
So whether they use Jerome Miller as a villain for the rest of his time, and because people want to see him lose, they'll still turn up because they want to see him get knocked out. And are they gonna fight for the name of the big baby? They get Jerome Miller in there. They get Jared Anderson in there. Whoever wins can keep that moniker. Can keep the moniker.
That's funny. That's true. Yeah. Now you're thinking like a promoter, Mike.
WWE style, that.
WWE style. Yeah, you're right. But I'd be surprised if they do, even though that does work in terms of a marketing aspect with that matchup. And like you said, Jarrell Miller could be like a villain that they could sell. Obviously, it works. People like seeing the hero and the villain, especially in boxing. I'd still be surprised if Top Rank gives him another chance ever since he popped this last time. So they gave him a chance already last time, but I don't know. But you're right, though. Like, it happened.
Just think how big the fight would be. They keep Jerome Miller under wraps until the end of next year, maybe 2022. He comes out and Tyson Fury, Jerome Miller press conference. They can both talk. Tyson Fury can be the hero. Tyson Fury can tell the crowd, I'm going to rid this, steroid taking guy. I'm going to get him out. I'm going to beat him so bad he has to leave boxing. Jerome Miller he'll do it. He's a payday. He'll play the villain. He speaks well. Look at him when he played the villain against Anthony Joshua. Perfect.
Right. You're right. Crazier things have happened in the sport of boxing over the years. So I guess I shouldn't be so surprised. I should adjust my emotions in terms of being surprised if that does happen. But we'll see. As time moves on, so does boxing. Also this upcoming weekend from the Mohegan Sun Casino, a PBC event in Connecticut on Showtime. Erikson Lubin goes up against Terrell Gausha for the vacant WBC Silver Super Welterweight title at 154 pounds. What do you think about this matchup? I think this is a pretty intriguing matchup.
It is an intriguing matchup. It was only 2016, the ESPN and Ring Magazine both had Erikson Lubin as their prospect of the year.
Right.
He's only got one loss. That loss coming to, a knockout to Charlo in 2017.
Charlo.
Gausha as well, also a very good amateur, was part of the U.S. Olympic team. So in terms of pedigree of boxing, this should be very, very good. For a boxing purist to watch, it should be a very good fight. I would say Lubin really should win it. I think he's younger.
Lubin's only 24, right?
Exactly. I mean, he really should, come again. If he can get everything sorted, just get back into the win column. Confidence. He's still with world-renowned trainer Kevin Cunningham.
Right.
So everything's on his side. He has time on his side as well. So just get back in there. A good performance against Terrell Gausha. This is for the WBC Silver Super Welterweight title. So that gets him back into the top 15 rankings of the WBC. Slowly but surely, I think we should see Lubin come again. Just depends how much that knockout affected him mentally, because that was a nasty knockout.
Bad.
Yeah, the first round uppercut.
Yeah, it was really nice though. It was a nice knockout. Yeah,
it was punch perfect. Because at the time, a lot of people were riding with Lubin, and they were kind of thinking that Charlo was just kind of like a flash in the pan. He was just loud and brash, and a lot of people were saying that Lubin was going to go in there and school him, but he walked straight onto it.
Yeah. It was probably just like the age thing, because the Charlos are a little bit more older, maybe had a little bit more experience, especially on the big stage and stuff like that. But you're right, though. I was surprised to see that Lubin was 24 years old. I thought he was a little older. I thought he was maybe in his late 20s, but he still has I think you said, like you said, he still has a lot of time ahead of him to recover and really make his mark.
Essentially 10 years. He's only 24. You can see him. Yeah, he's got at least 10 years.
Yeah. So I think I still think it's an intriguing matchup this weekend, Lubin and Gausha. But I probably lean towards Lubin, but it doesn't mean that Gausha should be counted out. That's a good matchup. That's a good matchup from a boxing, like we said, boxing purist perspective. Good matchup. Moving on that card. The co-main event, at least as of today. I'm not even going to pronounce his first name. I can never do it. Nayam Bayar, 11-1, goes up against Kobe Brady, who's undefeated at 15-0. What do you think about this matchup?
King Tug all the way. Has to be King Tug. I didn't even know who Breeder was. I actually looked him up and read about him for the podcast because obviously we had to talk about him. He fights out with Barry Hunter's gym, Washington, D.C. People will recognize Barry Hunter because he used to train both Lamont Peterson and his brother.
Right.
In my opinion, I think King Tug should win. Breedy for a lot of nobody so far. This is kind of a step up for him. King Tug, same sort of thing. You know, obviously suffered his one and only defeat to WBC champion Gary Russell Jr.
Right.
In February of this year, before the COVID hit. So, you know, people were kind of high on him. Some people actually kind of thought that King Tug might actually cause an upset against Gary Russell. So just one of those things is just going to kind of look and see how much it affects him. You know, some people can shrug a defeat off, you know, and carry on. Some people, it kind of affects them a lot and they start to come a little bit timid inside of the ring. So,
I mean, Brady's 15-0. Like, I mean, you said you looked up. I mean, I didn't know who he was either until you know we started talking about it. But 15-0. I mean, I know the lower weight class is a little different, but I mean, is it from what you saw? I'm assuming on BoxRec, was there anything notable in his career so far? Not
really. A lot of you know, like local shows, stuff like that, kind of like to pad the record out. I may be wrong. You know, this may be one of those instances where, you know, Breedy steps up to fight King Tug and, you know, we see how good he is. You know, he's fighting out of, you know, a respectable gym and, you know, Barry Hunter's gym in Washington. A lot of tough guys have come out of that. You know, the Petersons were both well schooled. So I could be completely wrong. You know, he might step up to and rise to the occasion. Big step up for him on Showtime. So, yeah,
it's an intriguing, at least from the numbers perspective and the records perspective, it's intriguing. So we'll see if it pans out. But King Tug, I think that's one of the best nicknames in boxing at the moment. I always forget about him just because he's, you know, he doesn't have the large name recognition. But King Tug, every time I hear that, it's like, whoever gave him that name is pretty good because he already has a difficult name as it is. Also on that card, Jaron Ennis, 25-0. Goes up against Juan Carlos Abreu. Ennis is one of those guys to watch. He's already 25-0, so I would think after this fight, especially if he wins, and especially if he wins in like statement fashion, I think Ennis is going to have to be in there with a pretty significant name or a significant step up following this fight. What do you think about this matchup?
Completely agree. I think anybody that kind of follows boxing closely, they've seen, you know, Jaron Ennis. A lot of people have been tipping him as, you know, they'll want to watch. And I think this year should have really have been his, you know, come out year. He should have really have come to the, you know, the casual fan's mind because, you know, he's unbeaten, 25-0, 23 KOs. So he gets in there and he gets people out of there, which is what people want to see. 2015 National Golden Gloves champion, ranked number one as an amateur at the 141-pound division before he turned pro. Pretty much everything you can do, he's done. He's accomplished. He's got a good style. He's from Philadelphia, so he's from a big boxing city.
Right.
Unfortunately, I think maybe 2021 now, you know, because obviously he wins this. We're already through, you know, halfway through September. It's looking like, you know, 2021 on some of those bigger shows and hopefully gets in there and fight some of the big names, and I think everything and every person in boxing thinks he's going to be eventually be a world champion. So
seems like it. I mean, who do you think following this fight, especially if he wins, who would you think would be a formidable opponent for him in his following fight?
The thing is, you've got to look at is who's with the PBC. That's the problem that we have.
No, that's true. Yeah.
I know obviously a lot of people in and around his weight division are with PBC, but are they going to want to match them up? You know, you've got your Errol Spence, Terrence Crawford, and Manny Pacquiao, Sean Porter, Keith Thurman, all those guys.
Yeah.
If you were a world champion, would you really want to fight Ennis when Ennis doesn't bring a lot to the table? That's the problem you have when you're someone as good as Jaron Ennis. Unless they're going to buy it, literally buy the title for him and give it to Ennis.
Do you think that PBC, and probably not, but do you think the PBC would consider sending Ennis to ESPN for a Crawford fight, just because Ennis obviously isn't on the name recognition in terms of business that Garcia, Thurman, Porter, Spence, all them are. So do you think they would be like, oh yeah, we could do that? I mean, I still don't think so because they really want to box Crawford out, but I think it's possible.
They're sending one of their, lesser known names, I guess, but he's still a star prospect, if you could call him that.
Right.
That would be a hell of a fight. Two very, very, very good boxers. And that would be a great fight, as a boxing hardcore, if you could call ourselves that, I guess, right. If you watch everything. That's a great fight. And it's win-win for, PBC. Ennis doesn't hold the belt. He could go over there with the chance of bringing one back.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a fight I'd love to see. I think the problem with Ennis, I could just touch on, is he's that good but brings nothing to the table. At the minute, he doesn't really bring money because he doesn't bring a world title. He has that Philly crowd. He has the PBC behind him, and hopefully Al Heyman will just start kind of throwing a little bit of money around to give him a title, because they're all kind of being held hostage by that small group of people for the last couple of years.
What about Virgil Ortiz and Ennis?
Great fight. I'd love that fight.
I think that's probably the best matchup between both of those guys at their respective careers right now. I think that's the best matchup.
That's one of those where I think that you'd rather see it with either one or two world titles down the line,
yeah.
But like you say, it's one of those things again where the same problem we've had with Crawford is you may have to do it without a world title because you can't get your hands on a world title because they're all, being held hostage. Look at Virgil Ortiz. None of them are in Golden Boy.
Yeah.
Not one world title. So that guy, he's got it hard unless, somebody thinks they can easily defeat him and they just give him a chance, because you have to get yourself, into a mandatory position where you have to force it.
Right. Yeah, I think that's the plan. For a Virgil Ortiz, if they're going to try to just force him into a mandatory position and try to force the hand of some of these other world champions at 147 at PBC and Top Rank. But we'll see. But I like Ennis. I like following his career, and I keep repeating, following this assumed win, which obviously it's not definite, but I think he needs a significant step up fight or name. I think he's ready for it. And obviously I'm excited to see where he goes from there. Moving on to the news and notes segment of the last round. Probably the most talked about topic in the last week or so, and probably why a lot of people tuned in this week, because it's likely in our title already. DAZN, Golden Boy, and Canelo at odds right now. Canelo just recently filed a lawsuit in the county of Los Angeles here in California against DAZN and Golden Boy. It's essentially a breach of contract lawsuit, but it was also recently dismissed. And what I've talked to a lot of people, because I had a lot of people who messaged me about that, like, hey, what happened? Like, I thought he just filed it and they dismissed it. Does that mean that that he was wrong? But I was reading about it that they didn't dismiss it because it had no merit. They dismissed it because it looks like Canelo's attorneys or whoever he hired as his legal team, they didn't identify the legal parties in a proper manner. It looks like they had some trouble identifying DAZN, just because, I think even now, me and you don't even really know who owns DAZN, because DAZN is there's so many players, and they have so many different companies. I saw the name Performance Investment Group or something like that, and then there's DAZN Global, and then there's DAZN LLC and DAZN Group. It looks like they have a bunch of different money or a bunch of different business names all over. So it's hard to pinpoint who owns the thing. But that's why it was dismissed, because I guess there was an error in terms of identifying the legal parties involved. But I wasn't really surprised. I don't know about you, Mike, but I wasn't really surprised when this happened, when it was reported that Canelo had filed a lawsuit in terms of breach of contract, because obviously they can't concede on a fight, or they can't, that's the wrong word, but they can't agree on a fight for him and the whole pay and the contract details. I wasn't surprised when he filed it. Well, I mean, what about you?
You know, wearing my Canelo hat, you know, if you've got a contract for $360 million over 11 fights, I think potentially $35 million a fight, and DAZN have been stupid enough to not put anything in there that they can pick and choose who you fight, then, hey, you know, win-win for Canelo. You know, like he can just try and fight Rocky Fielding and, you know, Yildirim and people like that and get paid the same as, you know, fighting, you know, a Kovalev or, you know, fighting a Callum Smith. Then that's really DAZN's fault. You know, putting my DAZN hat on, maybe they thought that they had a gentleman's agreement. You know,
that's what I think. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, obviously, but like, you know, when you get to be as big as DAZN and, you know, you're working for a party like that, not to have something in writing, it's kind of stupid, right?
But I mean,
you know,
like there's also the Ali Act, like where you can't necessarily force somebody to fight one person, or you can't put that in the contract that like, okay, if you sign with us or we sign you, you're going to fight this person. Like, I think that even though the Ali Act pretty much seems like it's just a piece of paper, it doesn't really get enforced.
Well, the other thing as well is the Ali Act is only enforced in the US.
That's right. Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So depending on maybe where the fight is or whatever, I don't know how it's enforced. You know, if he's fighting a British opponent in Britain, then does it class? I know that, you know, in the UK, you have people that, you know, manage and promote fighters, right, where in the US, that's illegal. You can't do that. Well, it's supposedly illegal. You know, look at Al Haymon. Right. But, yeah, it depends really on what hat you wear. You know, if you're you're kind of neutral and you kind of think that, you know, Canelo has been unreasonable because obviously, you know, we are in a pandemic. You know, Canelo's already a wealthy man. I believe that he did supposedly agree to take a small pay cut, but, you know, the money that DAZN was offering was substantially lower.
Right.
So,
see, but like the whole terms of the pay cut initially, and, you know, correct me if I'm wrong, but initially when they were reporting all these different details throughout the last month or month and a half or two or whatever it's been between Canelo and DAZN, Golden Boy, trying to get him a fight in September, Mexican Independence Day weekend, like, which has usually been his date the last several years. I didn't see any reputable report that Canelo was willing to take a pay cut. I saw that DAZN wanted to reportedly cut his purse in half, so from 35 to about, you know, 17, 18 million. But I never saw anything reported that Canelo said, well, I won't take 50%, you know, half, but like I'll give you like 20% or 30% or 15% or something like that. I never saw anything like that until recently. Until the lawsuit was filed, that's when I read something that said that he was willing to take a 30% pay cut, but DAZN still fought back against that and they wanted more. I mean, am I wrong?
No, that's right. You know, I think I read it was from ESPN, I believe, Steve Kim's article. You know, he said that he'd heard, you know, Canelo was willing to take less. And, you know, I don't think we'd be here at this moment if it wasn't for COVID, because it looks like, you know, back in November when we were chatting to Team Matchroom, it looks like, you know, they kind of said that they thought Billy Joe Saunders was going to get the fight. Right. That looked literally to be a few weeks away from being signed. And then obviously the coronavirus hit. And I know obviously Canelo kind of offered to fight Anthony Yarde for a WBC title because the WBC obviously wanted to jump in and get involved in, you know, that great amount of money that Canelo is, you know, floats around.
Do you really think that Canelo wanted to fight Yildirim though, like legitimately? I know in terms of getting the vacant belt, I get it, but like,
why not? If you're going to get paid $35 million.
No, you're right. I know why. In terms of why not, you're right. But like, I honestly, I don't know. Like, I know there was no way to get around Yildirim because he was, you know, a mandatory, or he was in that spot, which I say that in quotes, in air quotes, but
a mandatory that hadn't won for 2 years, and his claim to fame is getting knocked out by Chris Eubank Jr.
Exactly. So like, I don't. If Canelo and his team were really, I know in terms of getting that belt because it's vacant and they can fight for it and get another belt. Obviously, it's a great move. But if Canelo really thought that DAZN was going to be for that, and he's really getting mad because of that they were going to put him against somebody like Yildirim, who has no name recognition, and like you said, he got knocked out. He's known for being knocked out against Chris Eubank Jr. Then, you know, Canelo's not really the businessman that I thought he was. Like, you know, like can refile the lawsuit again by, I think, September 26th, I believe. They have a certain amount of time to refile, I think, by the end of the month. And then they can still move forward in the court case. And that's the first thing I thought of. One of the first things I thought of when I heard about the lawsuit is that, oh man, this could drag out. You know, DAZN, the guy who owns DAZN is a billionaire. He's like worth like $25 billion. You know, you don't think he has a team of lawyers and like some of the best lawyers in the world who are going to just drag this on or, you know, I know Canelo's got his own people, you know, I know Canelo's got his own people and he's obviously a millionaire and he can try to fight and all that stuff. But I mean, I think it kind of looks, in terms of who he hired as his legal team, I think it kind of looks, you know, kind of, I don't know what the error that they made where the lawsuit got dismissed because of an error as in not being able to properly identify the legal parties involved, which I get it. There's confusion among DAZN and who owns what. And there's a lot of moving parts there. But I think that like an error like that is such a small, minuscule legal error to make, especially when you're somebody with the reputation of Canelo, one of the biggest stars in the world, not just in boxing, but, you know, in pop culture. You know, like that kind of says something about the legal team you hired. And I looked up his legal team. They're located over there in the South Bay here in the Los Angeles area. But I don't know, man. Like, I just hope this isn't another Mikey Garcia situation. I hope that Canelo, DAZN, and Golden Boy come to some type of agreement and he gets back into the ring. I think honestly, you know, they're probably shooting for November since he fought in November last year. So that's what they're shooting for, to try to reach some type of agreement. But then it was also strange to me that Canelo listed Golden Boy in there, even though they are part of the contract negotiations and he's a part of their, you know, their promotional company. And then Oscar De La Hoya was like tweeting and putting on Instagram. He put something like, oh, you know, when like pretty much saying that he's not worried about anything, you know. And I think I saw a quote by Golden Boy or somebody at Golden Boy that said like, oh, you know, Canelo's beef is with DAZN. It's pretty much saying it's not with us. You know, we're just kind of listed there, but we're irrelevant. Well, I think if you're listed from a legal standpoint in the court system, like that doesn't, you can think all you want, but if he's going to list you in that, like, and the judge rules in his favor or something like that, like that means you're going to have to pay too, which I don't understand why. I don't know. The whole thing just seems like a whole big cluster. Am I wrong?
As far as I know, the Golden Boy are listed because of they agreed for Canelo to fight Triple G when Canelo never agreed that, but they supposedly told DAZN that they would sort that out. You know, they would have a Triple G Canelo 3. So they listed so Canelo listed them in it because he's kind of obviously turning around and saying like, I never agreed to that. You can't agree to that without my blessing.
Right. No, yeah, I think that was an issue at the beginning of his agreement, and you know, the following when he signed his agreement, that Golden Boy had some type of written agreement with DAZN saying they would get Triple G as an opponent again under the DAZN platform, and or that they told DAZN, like they promised DAZN, it could have been a gentleman's agreement, I don't know, something like that. But obviously that was an issue, and now it's coming up again. And then, you know, something that just popped out in my head too, I guess in also what was reported, I don't know if it was in the lawsuit written specifically, but DAZN was saying that premium opponents that they listed people as like Conor McGregor, Khabib, you know, and I know people were laughing at that, and you know, and I get it in terms of a boxing standpoint, I get it, like in terms of like premium, but like I know, but from a business standpoint, that's what they were looking at. You don't think HBO and Showtime and Fox and all these guys, if they had a chance to get a Canelo and like a Khabib or a Canelo and a, you know, a Nate Diaz or a Conor McGregor or what have you, you don't think that they would jump on that if they had a chance to bid on that? From a money standpoint, that's all they care about. It's all ratings and eyeballs or pay-per-view buys. So I get it in terms of like, it's oh, you know, DAZN, I can't believe they consider them premium opponents. They're not even boxers and stuff like that. Yeah, from a boxing perspective, I understand. But DAZN needs to. They're paying the guy $35 million a fight. They're trying to recover and make some type of profit here. Which, and I'm not saying like I agree, but like I think we would, if we were at the head of DAZN, I think we'd obviously have a different conversation, right?
No, I would agree. It's like kind of like we touched on before. If you've got your business hat on, all you care about is subscriptions and eyeballs. So that's why we're getting people like KSI and Logan Paul and Jake Paul fighting, because they're getting paid well. And DAZN are getting subscriptions and eyeballs into boxing. And then obviously, if you're looking at it from a boxing fan perspective, then we don't want to see him fight a Khabib. We don't want to see him fight a Conor McGregor, because they're not boxers, and Canelo's just going to carry him and, blast him out the ring the same way that Mayweather did.
Right.
So, this year really has just been a write-off in terms of your A-star boxers, your Anthony Joshuas, your Canelos and guys like that. We're not going to see them. Right. We're not going to see them. There's not enough money. There's no gates. We're not going to see them till 2021. We may see, Joshua Pulev, or, we may see Tyson Fury, Deontay Wilder, if they can get some outlandish site fee where having no crowd.
Like Saudi Arabia.
Exactly, yeah, exactly. Or some rich billionaire has it on a boat, just for his private viewing or something like that.
No,
something outrageous. Just because of, unfortunately, it's the same old thing. Money makes the world go round, and money makes boxing go round, and those guys don't want to risk their career and and their life really. Fighting for. It's a lot of money to me and you, but if Canelo's used to getting 35 million and then they suddenly turn around and say, "Hey, we can only afford to pay you 15," then to Canelo, that's kind of like, well, no, I'll wait. I'll wait till next year.
Lifestyle. He has to keep up his lifestyle.
Yeah, and obviously, me and you don't understand that, because me and you are 15 million. That's still 15 million, but when you're contracted for 35, kind of like you're like, well, you know what? I'll just sit and wait. I'll sit and train, and I'll just wait until 2021 when I can pick up 35 million for fighting maybe potentially the same opponent.
Right, but then there's also the fact in the contract, supposedly there's something called a force majeure clause, which is pretty much like it's pretty common in the United States in contracts. I'm sure probably in England or something like that. But in terms of if there's like some type of act of God that affects the business or the world or the region or whatever, where both parties are affected by it, or whoever's affected by it, then the contract can be amended or something like that. Certain things can be done. So supposedly there's that type of clause in there in the contract with Canelo and DAZN, and that's what they're going to rely on in terms of trying to cut his pay and everything. Which I think, honestly, if that's true, if that clause is in there, I don't see how DAZN can lose. It's from a legal perspective, like in a legal court, I don't see how Canelo could win if they say like, hey, look, we have this clause in here. There's obviously a pandemic going on that hasn't happened in, I don't even know how many years, 50, 60, 70 years or whatever, maybe longer. And it's affected our business. We can't get a live gate. We can't get people to come in, we can't have people travel, for formidable opponents. I think from a legal perspective, I think the only thing that helps Canelo in this standpoint is that he's been trying to negotiate with them, and he can put the attempts he's been making with DAZN. His lawyers can order like, look, my client has been trying to make attempts with them, trying to find solutions, and they're being unreasonable or something like that. But I don't think DAZN is going to let this play out. I think one of two things happen. They either say like, look, we'll pay you 30% less, or we'll pay you whatever he's asking. Because if this goes on, DAZN is likely going to have to produce their finances, so the court can see like, well, if it's really affecting you, we got to see it. Obviously, they're affected, but and then all this stuff is going to come out, and then like a bunch of names that we've probably never seen before are going to come out, like, oh, this is who's in charge, or this person's in charge. And DAZN, no company wants to let that happen, especially DAZN, because they're so new. So either they let Canelo they let him go. They're like, you know what, forget it. This isn't worth it. And they pretty much get out of the boxing business. They just kind of write out the rest of the agreements they have, and then they get out and they focus on other sports, or they just agree to whatever Canelo wants, and like, oh, I'll take 30% less, and they give it to him, or what have you. Because, you know, even though DAZN likely has that clause in their contract, I still think they're in a really tough spot. They really are.
Yeah, I would be surprised if, you know, DAZN's contract isn't watertight. You wouldn't think that they would be such a big, world-renowned company. And obviously this is kind of their first exploit-ish into boxing. But you would still think that they would have legal teams, you know, good enough to make sure that they can get what they want. And at the same time, you know, if Canelo gets a legal team to look into it, of course they're going to take the legal action, because if they don't get paid. At the end of the day, and if you've got somebody like Canelo that you know is worth millions and millions of dollars, and you can drag that out through the court for a long time, as a legal representative for him, you're making bank.
Right.
Win, lose, or draw, those guys are getting paid. So like when you see Canelo walking through your door, you're kind of like, ka-ching, here we go. This guy's going to get taken for a lot of money, you know. So right. I don't know, dude. You're going to tell Canelo you've got a case. Yeah, we can, you know, we can get around this, you know, because at the end of the day, like even if the contract with DAZN is watertight, you're going to tell him that so you get paid. Right.
Yeah. I mean, we'll see, man. Obviously, so far, this is also a cluster, and we'll see how it pans out. But, you know, I think that they were reporting that DAZN didn't consider Callum Smith and Billy Joe Saunders premium opponents. I mean, you know, when they say premium, obviously they mean money, subscribers, you know, ratings, all that stuff, watches, listens, or whatever. That's what they mean. So from ignoring the boxing aspect of Callum Smith and Billy Joe Saunders, obviously they're premium opponents in terms of boxing, especially Billy Joe Saunders against a Canelo. I think we can all agree on that. But when you take away that aspect and categorize it as premium from a finances standpoint, what's your take on that, Mike?
I think they would be classed as premium when you look at DAZN moving into the UK market. Because obviously that was the reason they were going to fight them in May, was because obviously DAZN that weekend had looked at, you know, starting it in the UK. So that was why the two opponents for were potentially Callum Smith and Billy Joe.
Do you think it's realistic that Canelo would have went to the UK to fight one of these guys, even though they probably could have sold out a stadium just because it's Canelo's first time in the UK? I think that could have happened. But do you really think that like Canelo would have went to the UK to fight one of these guys?
Not necessarily gone to the UK. They maybe would have just had the fight at a more suitable time for the UK market. You know, they could have done it in Vegas, but done it slightly earlier.
Maybe.
Because, you know, that weekend was when DAZN was obviously going to start in the UK. So I'm sure they would have had to have accommodated the UK market somehow.
Right.
I don't know whether the fight would have been in the UK. Canelo might have done, just because, you know, look at his career so far. He's done multiple weights. You know, he's fought obviously mainly over here in the US and Mexico. Maybe he wanted to go to the UK, see the market. He wanted to, you know, him and AJ are probably the biggest stars, and maybe he thought to himself, well, fucking AJ's selling out stadiums in the UK. Why can't I?
Right.
So maybe he wondered, you know, whether he could do that against a, you know, a well-placed UK opponent.
Right. No, you're right. I mean, we'll see. We'll see. You know, hopefully I think his team will refile by the end of the month. I think that's the date, September 26th. And then, you know, this also could be just a front. Canelo just probably said like, oh, you know what? Let's file this just so they can know like, hey man, look, I'm serious. You know, it's kind of like a tactic, but who knows? You know, obviously we can just sit from the outside and watch what's going on, but it is what it is. Also moving on, Devin Haney and Gary Russell Jr. are still kind of going back and forth. You know, Gary Russell Jr. has been calling out Crawford, Devin Haney, like just kind of, you know, boasting about these guys. And I don't know where this came from. But Devin Haney, like I guess they've been reporting that Russell Jr. or Yuriorkis Gamboa is in the running for a November fight against him. I mean, I don't see Russell. I don't see that happening with Gary Russell. If anything, it's going to be Gamboa. I'm like 99% sure it'll be Gamboa.
Totally agree. The Gamboa fight seems more realistic, but Gary Russell Jr. against Terrence Crawford or Devin Haney, fuck, give me that fight all day, every day. That'd be a great fight. Just the fact
Gary Russell Jr. against Terrence Crawford.
Dude, I would just love to see that. Just the fact that Gary Russell just to move up in weight, all those weight categories he's going to skip to fight that. They keep going back and forth on social media. It seems pretty realistic. Like, Gary Russell punched him back in the day at the Olympic training camp, and Terrence Crawford didn't do anything. And so it's kind of, it'd be a fun fight. I would assume Terrence Crawford would probably win because it's a natural weight category, whereas Gary Russell's jumping 3 or 4 weight categories to fight him if he decides to fight him. Devin Haney seems to shout about fighting everybody and fights nobody. So, yeah, Gamboa. I would put my money on Gamboa, though.
Yeah, it's probably going to be Gamboa. That's very likely. And then Devin Haney has obviously the WBC title at 135 pounds, but they're saying that Lopez and Lomachenko is undisputed. And I saw an interview. Somebody posted a clip of somebody asked Mauricio Sulaiman about that. About that issue, and what did he say? He's like, I sent it to you. What I saw, like, there was positive confusion.
Yeah, positive confusion. Yeah,
I don't know. Like, the interviewer asked him, like, "Hey, if Lomachenko Lopez is undisputed, like, well, where does that leave Devin Haney? Is he not a title holder, or is that going to be another undisputed fight? If the winner of Lopez Lomachenko fight Devin Haney, is it a second undisputed fight?" And you could see, like, Sulaiman was like struggling to answer it. He ended up just calling it. He's like, there is confusion. He's like, but it's the best kind of confusion. It's positive confusion.
I liked it the other day when somebody messaged the WBC and they came back saying that they were a non-profit organization. I was like, no way on this God green earth that they're a non-profit organization. Why would they have so many belts then? Charity
starts in their pockets. It is what it is. Everybody knows, man, but it's fun to rag on these promotional companies sometimes. I think we're always surprised, even though we know what's coming down the pipe. We're always surprised at what's coming next. So, moving on, the September 26th Showtime pay-per-view led by the Charlos. Is going to cost $74.95. From a boxing standpoint, wait a minute. I can see your face. Obviously, people listening to us on audio can't see your face right now, Mike, but I can see it. I saw a lot of complaining for $74.99, and I get it. I'm not saying that I don't have any reservations, but from we keep going back to this term, boxing purist standpoint, that's a really good card.
It is a good card. Obviously you've got Charlo, Derevyanchenko, Charlo Rosario, Casemiro against Duke Micah, Danny Roman against Juan Carlos Payano, Brandon Figueroa, Luis Nery. So that's 5 world title fights. Right. Some really good fights, but it's just $74.95. Like,
well, what do you think? What do you think a reasonable price point would have been?
It's hard to say, isn't it? Because in terms of like,
I think $49. I think $50.
I was going to say $50, but then at the same time, we've probably paid $75,
right,
for a card before where you get 1, maybe 2 good fights because all the money's gone to their main event.
Right, that's what you're paying for, is the main event.
Yeah, whereas this, you're actually paying $75 for 6 good fights. It just doesn't have that one marquee name, which is, right. I think brings the confusion, because you're kind of thinking, well, what the hell am I paying $75 for? It doesn't have a Mayweather, it doesn't have a McGregor, but you're actually paying really more for the actual entire card.
Right.
Where normally you get, like I said, like 1, maybe 2 fights, and the rest of it is just up and coming guys who are picking up a couple of $1,000 because the main event's stolen 90% of the budget.
I saw something on Twitter after this news was reported that said that, and it was kind of interesting. It was pretty much saying, I think I messaged you about it, or we talked about it on the phone, where it said that, when a pay-per-view is announced, obviously you can buy it way in advance when it's essentially the price point is announced. The earlier you buy it, the lower the price point is. So, and obviously the closer you buy it to the event or on the day of the event or what have you, it's at the highest it'll be. So it encourages fans to buy it earlier because it's just say, okay, it starts at $44.99. They announced it today. And as the weeks go by, it goes up, 49, 54, 59, 64, 69, whatever, until it gets to whatever, $75 or whatever like that. You know what I mean? Like, so it encourages people like, oh, well, I'd rather buy it now because I'll save $25, instead of buying them on the day of, I honestly think maybe from a business perspective, I don't know what the details are behind the scenes, but I honestly think that's not that bad of an idea that should be ran like as a type of trial. I mean, what do you think? Yeah,
that's not a bad idea, just to see how many people decide to jump in early and, saves $25. I'd be intrigued to see really the figures, for this afterwards, with there being really no marquee name on there.
Right.
It's going to be intriguing to see, especially with the coronavirus. Are people going to want to jump in on, a $75 pay-per-view with no marquee name?
Right.
So it'll be interesting to see the figures for that during this time.
Yeah, but we'll see. But I saw a lot of people complaining, but we'll see. Obviously they have to charge that much because they have all these fighters have guarantees, especially the Charlos. So, and there's no gate. So you think if there was a gate, do you think they would still charge $75? I honestly think it would have been more.
I don't know, because you said it, like you got to look at those. I'm sure the Charlo brothers probably, their guarantee's pretty high. Dermanchenko's probably a decent amount because he's had some good fights. Rosario probably gets paid okay just because he's a world champion. He's never really had huge paydays.
Right.
Casemiro, Duke Micah, Danny Roman, I think they probably don't earn a great deal. Neither does Payano. Brandon Figueroa, maybe. Brandon Figueroa seems to always get onto these like Showtime and Fox.
I think he gets some pretty decent paydays. Not crazy, but
yeah,
his consistency on these cards kind of might give him something.
Same as Luis Nery. He's been in and around for a long time, the world title. So I'm sure he gets paid okay.
Right. But we'll see. But either way, it's still a very intriguing card. It's a very good card from top to bottom. So for $75, from a boxing standpoint, boxing purist, I don't know how many times we've used that word in this episode already. It's a good card. Is it worth $75? That's something you're going to have to decide. And also rounding off your favorite of mine, Andy Ruiz Jr. And Julio Cesar Chavez Jr., the Mexican stars in boxing behind Canelo Alvarez, have been seen training with Jorge Capetillo in Las Vegas. Capetillo, for people who don't know, for our listeners who don't know or are not aware, Capetillo was the cut man for Tyson Fury's fight against, I believe, Otto Wallin. He was on our show subsequent to that fight, so you can go back if you want to listen to his interview following that Tyson Fury fight. He talks about that fight. He was on our show, but both Chavez Jr. and Ruiz have been seen training with Capetillo in Vegas. Chavez Jr. was surprising for me. Ruiz wasn't really surprising, but Chavez Jr. was. I mean, what do you think about that whole partnership right there?
The Ruiz one was just kind of odd because he kind of came out saying that he was going to go with Reynoso and never seemed to show up. He seemed to, the coronavirus hit. He seemed to be just kind of training by himself. Next thing, he was training with Capetillo, and I was like, okay, he's just in Vegas. He's just using the gym. Do you think? I thought about that too, but like, obviously, for the Reynoso, Canelo is the lead guy in their stable, and because Canelo didn't fight and they were still training him, and then Brian Garcia's still there and stuff like that. I mean, do you think they really just said like him and Ruiz just kind of split? They're like, oh, you know what, it's not going to work out. There's just too much stuff going on, or do you think Ruiz just kind of knows like, all right, well, I'm not going to be
the priority here. So I'm going to go somewhere where I'm going to be able to get some work. Capetillo's not really a trainer, but he knows the business enough to kind of give you some work. And I honestly think Ruiz is just trained to keep himself in shape. And he's went up to Vegas because, obviously COVID was happening and up there. It was opened a little bit earlier as compared to California. But I still think he's going to train with Canelo and the Reynosos just because Ruiz is new to the spotlight and he wants to be around Canelo. He wants to be around the Reynosos. I think he loves that attention factor. So I don't think that partnership is gone. I just think that it's on hold for now.
I don't know. I think it may be gone. If it's not gone, then I don't see the sense behind going to a new trainer, but then never going to train with him until the last minute. Because, they're going to want him to do things the Reynoso way, which is going to take time. It's going to take time to train your body, train yourself out of bad habits, and to train yourself into doing the things that Reynosos want you to do.
Or what if he has went down there and trained? He just hasn't put it up. I mean, just because we don't see it online. I know he posts a lot online, but what if he has and he just hasn't posted it? And him and Reynoso, they know that they've trained together. They just haven't publicized it. That could happen.
He might have been down there, but he hasn't been down there a lot because don't forget Capetillo's gym's in Vegas.
That's true.
And obviously, Reynoso's is in San Diego.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of, did he want to be the big fish in a small pond? And that's why he went with Capetillo, because he knew that, if he goes into Reynoso's gym, there ain't no bigger fish than Canelo.
No, right. Yeah. But we'll see. And then Chavez Jr. just showing up there was crazy too. I'm sure Capetillo, he seems like a really good guy. He was like, hell yeah, I got Ruiz and Chavez Jr. here. It's like, I'm sure he's happy, which is cool. Good friend of the show over there, Jorge Capetillo in Las Vegas. But as we wrap up here, we appreciate you guys listening, whether you guys are listening on your drive home from work, or on your drive to work, or if you're just listening to us in your home, you're outside, you have some earbuds in or what have you. Obviously, we appreciate it like we do each and every week. And before we sign off, Mike, go ahead and tell our listeners where they can follow us.
It's going to be at The Last Round 12 on Twitter and Instagram. And obviously be sure to join us next week for the fight reviews and previews. We've got the big Josh Taylor fight coming up on the 26th.
Coming up on the 26th. So once again, for my co-host, Michael Shepard, I'm Danny Z. This is The Last Round.
Thanks for supporting and listening to the show. Follow us at The Last Round 12 on social media. Rate, review, and subscribe. This